Seaton of Grace United Church of Christ, located in Sauk Village, Illinois. I am so excited tonight to be here on our Thursday night Bible study, and we've been doing a series on women of the Bible. And even though the messages have been about women in the Bible, they're certainly lessons are applicable to anybody who has a mind to understand better these particular women, some of which are unnamed, like the woman tonight, the woman at the well. I want to start with a quote that our facilitator, Lisa, uses, and it's on page 135 if you have a book. If not, I'm going to read it aloud. And it says that the first four letters of the word Messiah is mess. It is almost as if Jesus, the Messiah, is the perfect fit for our mess. God knew we would have a mess, and that the Messiah would come and touch our mess, and out of that would give us a message. I love that.
Yes.
And that message, as we know, is a testimony. But I never considered that mess is in Messiah. Never thought about that before. My gosh, that is so awesome. But let us pray. Heavenly Father, creator of all that is good and perfect, we thank you and we bless you because you are God and God all by yourself. Oh, we thank you for the rising of the sun and the going down of the same. We thank you for being able to freely walk into your house, to praise your name, to learn more about you so that we might become better people when we leave this place. Bless, God, all these who are here. Bless those that are on their way. Bless those that wanted to come but were unable. And oh God, we send many blessings and much love to those who are watching us in the World Wide Web. We certainly thank you for this opportunity to be able to share this word. And we encourage those who are listening, if they have questions or comments, that they please feel free to send them. In Jesus' name we thank you. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Messiah takes our mess and sends us away with a message. So we've got the woman at the well. Wow, one of my favorite women. She was so powerful, though they wouldn't even give her a name, but that's okay. She's also been dubbed as the first preacher, the first female preacher, because she certainly left there with that after that encounter with Jesus, and she went and told people, and they came running. Now, how many times did that happen in the Bible? So here we have this mysterious woman. Besides the fact that she's a woman, which was not regarded very highly in biblical times. In biblical times, huh? Maybe in 2017 too, huh? She was biracial. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And she'd been with a lot of men. She was poor. She was a social outcast. But she was seeking something. She knew there was something better than what she currently had. She was sought out by God and used by God. And that was kind of my summation of the woman at the well. It kind of comes from page 132, where it gives a little bit more detail about her, the fact that she was a Samaritan, so that's why I said she was biracial. And being a Samaritan made her a social outcast. Jewish people did not care for Samaritans. They did not feel that they were pure enough to be considered a part of the Jewish faith. And so that made her biracial. We know that from history, a lot of times people who are biracial have a difficult time knowing where exactly they should fit in. Then, besides being a woman, she had been with a lot of men. And that also did not fare very well. And in many communities, that's the same kind of stigma that women have. they talk about the fact that the time of day that she came to the well was not the typical time that women came to gather water. But she probably came at that time because of her reputation, which had been sullied a bit. And she didn't want to be privy to all of the negative talk that other women might say because everybody knew her background. So let's go to the introduction if we could. And can I get a volunteer to read the first 2 paragraphs, please?
In one sense, the encounter between Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well is not all that unique. It is an encounter that has been repeated again and again throughout the ages. We meet a woman whose life is in shambles, fragmented and broken by sin. Her life is a real mess. While drawing water from the local well, she meets the Messiah. They talk, she asks questions, and something wonderful happens. Her eyes are open to the truth. Her heart is touched by the kindness of Jesus, and she is transformed by God's power. A whole new life begins for her. In John chapter 4, we witness this metamorphosis, a woman whose life is a profound mess, an outcast from the community, becomes the bearer of a life-giving message to the very people she had been avoiding. Her mess became her message when she met the Messiah.
Amen. How about the last 2 paragraphs?
What God did and through this woman 2,000 years ago can become the anthem of your life as well. Romans 5 and 8 tells us that God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. God knows our frailties, our wrong attitudes, and is aware of each of our sins. Yet, he still loves us, and he wants to fill us and use us for his glory. When we bring our mess to the Messiah, he restores us and gives us a message for the world. As you prepare for this study, be open and ready for God to speak. God just might be calling you to be his messenger in a new and fresh way.
We have a few questions, one of which I just kind of came up with. I was just kind of meditating over this story and just really thinking about all the stories that are in the Bible that are similar to the woman at the well. It might be a man, but they're stories of people who are not considered in the best light, really going through something, and then something wonderful happens to them. And I was just wondering, why do we think the Bible has those kind of stories in it? Why is that important for us as believers in Christ?
To know that they do have testimonies like some of us do.
Okay. So to know that it's possible for everybody to have a testimony.
They serve as object lessons, I think, to translate to us a message about transformation. If you do these things the way this character did, you might have the same result.
And it also gives encouragement to let you know that all is not lost because you have been a certain way in society and that you're an outcast. And we've certainly been learning a lot about the women that are being outcast, that there is still hope and that our Messiah gives us that hope and he fixes our mess.
How can we, certainly we're not Jesus, and we've never been asked to do that. There's only one Jesus. But we have certainly been asked to represent the Christ. So let's bring it here to this time. We can even say Sauk Village, or we can say Chicago. These kind of issues that this woman at the well encountered or had are very common. And how do we respond to that? How do we represent our faith in such a way that it allows a person who might have come to a situation, come to our church, come to an organizational meeting, or just been walking up and down the street or something with their head bowed, and feeling very bad about their situation? How do we help them leave feeling better than they came?
I think that when people come to church in the state of mind you just described, they're looking for something to lift them out of that doom and gloom. They're looking for joy. They're looking for other people who have hope. And when we model those things for those people, for example, here at Grace, we have exuberant worship services from time to time, and we feel the movement of the Holy Spirit in those services. And when people feel this all around them, they say, well, I want some of that. And they might come back, or they might do some further investigation and consider us as a whole.
Well, if we look down on page 133 a little bit further, it says, talk about it. Briefly respond as a group to one of the following questions. So you can pick which question you want to respond to, if you should choose to respond. The first one says, sometimes we have one of those really good days, the kind we wish could go on and on forever. Talk about a good day you experienced recently and what made that day so special for you. Then the opposite of that then would be some days are just plain messy. Things spin out of control and we need someone to help us clean up. Talk about a day you've had when things in your life got a bit messy.
I think the second one is more often than the first. Seems like really good days. Really good days are you wake up in the morning, God is blessing you, it's beautiful outside, you go to work, everybody gets along, traffic is wonderful, to get back home, and everyone is in a joyous mood, and you're just like, God, that was a good day. Everything went well. Can I have that again tomorrow? Probably not. But when you do, you just know the magnificence of God when you have those good days. I don't want to talk about the messy ones.
Well, can I kind of jump into your life and tell about a good day, because I kind of felt some of the joy of that, even though it wasn't for me personally. But the day that your husband was elected mayor, that was an extremely good day. And I know I couldn't have experienced any more joy than you guys did, but I was certainly happy for you because I realized that at some point there were times when that was not an easy journey, you know, and not to say that anybody could have won, and just the fact that when people win something that they've desired for so long, it's exciting. It is very, very exciting. So I'm sorry.
Very, very emotional. And we had the pleasure of having Deacon Reed there with us on that night.
Yeah.
And he was there midday, I would say late afternoon, when the worry, we've gone through the process, the polls are open. Now you're biting your nails because you're not seeing the returns the way you envision they should be. You're seeing people coming out to vote, but it didn't look like it were the people that would have supported him. So we go through the worry, and then about 5 o'clock that afternoon, the mayor candidate comes through, and we're biting our nails and like, how's it looking out there? And he's looking at us like, what is wrong with you guys? I mean, it was like a death, funeral that we were at. And he's like, what's wrong with you guys? I'm like, Derek, we're looking at the returns. They don't look. He said, I got this. I said, you do? Okay. And then everybody got joyous, and then he left out again. And then when we got our first return on the first precinct, and he had it 2-1, and that was one of their strongholds, and he had it for 2-1. We knew then, and the joy you just cannot contain because of all the trials, all the challenges that you have to go through, and you can't say a word, and you can't fight back, and you just have to rely on God to bring you through. So it was very challenging, but then when the reward, you're like, thank you. And you have to be forever thankful.
So you guys kind of experienced both of these in one day.
In one day. In a few hours.
Yeah,
In a
amen.
few hours.
Well, certainly, like you said, we've all had some of those messy days, and we certainly thank God that we've had good days. Matter of fact, the good days have far exceeded the messy days. At least I can say that in my life,
Yes.
because even when you look back at some of those messy days, you say, well, maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, you know. I mean, I think about, for me, the day that we found out that Mike had cancer, you know, after almost 2 months of thinking it was just pneumonia. And I was on my way to the hospital, my routine, because they had at this point put him in the hospital. So I gotten up, was getting dressed, and the phone rang. And so when I picked the phone up, he said to me that a doctor had come into his room. And I was usually there. It was one of the few nights that I went home to just not have to sleep in a chair, and told him that he had cancer. And oh my God. And I could not express how I felt because he was already in tears on the phone. And I just thought how cruel for someone to come in the middle of the night and wake him up like that, or early, the wee hours of the morning, and wake him up and just say that like that. And it wasn't like they didn't think he had family around, you know, because I was always there. So my day just went, you know, because we just weren't expecting that. And so, of course, now I've got to get myself together again after getting off the phone with him, to then, as I'm driving to the hospital, to plan what my strategy is going to be for this. And of course, you know, even though a lot of people don't want to talk about that, and it took me a long time to get to that place, eventually I was able to celebrate his homegoing and his, I believe, living with Jesus. And so that was a good day for me to finally come to that realization that actually a person helped me with that, because I shared with some of the medical history problems, you know, problems that he encountered. And then she thought, wow, so the Lord allowed him to live all that time so he could beat you and you could take him to the Lord. And I said, oh my gosh, I guess that's right. And then it began to connect that, well, he's with Jesus, so we're going to see each other again. It's okay now. So, all right. Anyone else?
Yeah, my daughter has been ill lately, and her foot has started turning, blue. And kind of find out she was walking on a tack that was in her shoe, and it had started to be open again. And she searched her shoe, and she found out what the problem actually was. So now she's doing much better. She knows now what to do, what not to do.
Oh my gosh.
And the medicine they had given her was killing her inside more than it was hurting her wound. But now they readjusted everything. She found out she is a diabetic. She's taking her time, doing her medications and what have you, and using everything that she's getting better.
Praise God.
Let me tell you what I've heard of these three testimonies here. I've heard that no single day is either a total loss or full of total joy. That you may start out one way and something else interrupts that, but you return to that state of joy if you change your perspective. And there was that perspective change. Something different happened that changed your negativity into positivity in all three of these cases.
Amen. Our encounter with the Messiah.
Yes.
The encounter with the Messiah, and the Messiah shows up for so many people. So we're going to switch now to the video to hear a little bit more about the woman at the well.
And a whole host of ordinary days. But then there are those days we regret. Days where we find ourselves in a mess, sometimes a mess that haunts us, hinders us, redirects us, and we wonder if life will forever be a string of consequences from that mess. I have a story. I have a mess. And while I once thought that nothing good could ever come from my mess, I had an intimate encounter with Jesus, my Messiah. And from the ashes of my mess, God gave me a message, just like a woman who once ventured close to Jesus, sitting at a well. So today we're in John chapter 4, verse 7. It's a story that maybe some of you have heard before, the Samaritan woman at the well. And I have a suspicion that if you've been to any women's conferences or any retreats, you've probably heard a message given on the woman at the well. But before you run away and say, I've heard this one before, been there, done that, have the t-shirt, well, I want to point out something that I think is really cool from this very familiar story, but it's an unfamiliar revelation. So that's where we want to be today. You see, the story starts out in John chapter 4, starting in verse 7, by saying this. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan. How can you ask me for a drink?" For you see, the Jews did not associate with the Samaritans. The Samaritans were what the Jews considered half-breeds. They were Jews married with Gentiles, and they were a disrespected, a lowly people. And so when Jesus, this Jewish man, was talking to the Samaritan woman, that was quite rare. So the Samaritan woman's saying, "Why are you even talking to me?" Jesus answers her in verse 10. "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman says, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, and also his sons and his flocks and his herds?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again." And I imagine he probably pointed at the well. "But whoever drinks the water I give him," and I imagine he points to his heart, "will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give him will become a spring of water welling up to eternal life." And the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming to this well to get my daily water." You see, I think sometimes when we're in kind of a messy life situation, which we'll soon find out this Samaritan woman was absolutely in a messy situation, we want quick answers. We want convenient solutions, and we want that fix that's going to help us live an easier life. So when this woman says, "Give me this water that I won't have to keep lugging this big jar to the well every day," that's what she was looking for, this shallow answer. But Jesus is about to redirect her. He's about to say, "I give answers, but they're not going to be shallow. And I give fixes, but they're not going to be quick." So you see, Jesus says in verse 16, "Go call your husband and come back." You see, Jesus wanted to get straight to the heart of this woman's mess. The woman says in verse 17, "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is, you've had 5 husbands, and the man you have now is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true, woman." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that this place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." In verse 21, Jesus declared, "Believe me, woman, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem." This woman in verse 25 says, "I know that Messiah, that Christ is coming. And when he comes, he's going to explain everything to us." Again, this woman is saying, "I want convenient, quick answers. I want convenient, quick solutions. I want to not have to come to this well every day with my water jug. And I want this Messiah because he's going to answer these questions that have haunted me my whole life." And once again, Jesus says, "Oh no, we're going to dig a little deeper today. We're not going to get quick, easy solutions and simple answers. We're about to go deep." Verse 26, Jesus declares, "I who speak to you am he."
Well, I grew up, my parents were both migrant workers. It was just really hard in school to fit in. Low self-esteem. I didn't get a lot of encouragement from my family. Didn't get a lot of affection from my dad. My mom, she became very abusive. I basically got a full-time job and moved out of the house. So I worked Monday through Friday, and on the weekends just partied. Got into the wrong crowd. I met my husband, and I didn't realize it then that he had a drinking problem. It was mainly he liked to party and I liked to party, and so that's what we did, and that's really what brought us together. We were married maybe a few months when I discovered that I was pregnant with my first child, and so I decided that it was time to back off some of the partying. But when I quit drinking and he continued the drinking, that's when I started seeing that something just wasn't right. And I started at that time attending church with my sister-in-law and learning about Jesus and who he really was. It was during this time that I committed my life to the Lord, and I decided to just change my life and my thinking, and I just felt basically like a new person. When I was going crazy trying to fix everybody and fix everything, it just didn't work. It was just too much. But when I put it down and just laid it all on the cross, he took care of it all. He worked behind the scenes when I didn't think there was any hope, but I just trusted. He healed my husband. He healed my marriage. It took a while. It took a lot of years of Christian counseling, of trust, to just set aside my own fears and to really trust God. And when I did, he took care of it all and restored what needed to be restored.
And at that point, the woman at the well has a divine encounter with Jesus, and she knows it's Jesus. Verse 28, then leaving her water jar, leaving behind her desire for quick fixes and easy answers, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Christ? And they came out of the town and made their way toward him. You see, this woman who had a mess had such a divine encounter with the Messiah. And in that moment where she realized this is the Messiah, he touched her mess and turned it into a message. And she didn't just sit back and say, give me those quick fixes and easy answers anymore. When she was touched by the Messiah, when her mess was touched by that Messiah and turned into a message, she became faithful with that message. And she left where she was. She left her desires for quick fixes and easy answers, and she headed back, for there were people who needed to know what she had found. What about you? What about your life? Have you found in certain parts of your life that you have a mess that you've just never quite been able to get over? Maybe a mess that's hindered you, held you back, made you feel incapable or inadequate? I know what that feels like because I lived with a mess for a long time. It started when I was about 8 years old, when I tried so desperately to get my daddy to say that he loved me. I'd put on a pretty dress and gone and stood beside his chair, and he ignored me. As a matter of fact, he ignored me most of my life, and if he ever did speak to me, he would often say, you know, Lisa, I never wanted children, especially not a girl. So I took that hurt and that shame and I pushed it deep down in my heart. And it became a mess that defined me, a mess that hindered me, a mess that redirected me, a mess that ruined a lot of relationships. Yeah, I definitely wanted quick, easy answers. I wanted quick solutions in my life. But then I had a divine encounter with the Messiah who touched my mess and revealed to me that I didn't have to be the child of a broken parent the rest of my life. I could be the child of God. And that gave me a message to take to all these other women who in their life had been hurt, rejected, abandoned, told that they were unloved. You know, isn't it interesting that the first 4 letters of Messiah is the word mess? It's almost as if Jesus himself, Jesus the Messiah, is the perfect fit for our mess. That it was always supposed to be this way, that always God knew that we would have a mess because we live in a broken world, and that the Messiah would come and touch our mess, and out of that would give us a message. And that's what he did with the Samaritan woman. It picks back up. Many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him. In other words, once they met the reality of Jesus, of what this Messiah had done in this woman's life, once they saw that this Messiah could touch a mess and give her such rich hope, a message of forgiveness and redemption, she kept screaming, "He told me everything I ever did." And no longer was she embarrassed by it. For she had been healed, she had been touched, she had been forgiven. Verse 40, so when the Samaritans came to him, when they came to Jesus, they urged him to stay with him, and he stayed 2 days. And because of his words, many more became believers. They said to the woman in verse 42, "We no longer believe just because of what you have said. Now we have heard for ourselves." In other words, now we see our mess can be touched by the Messiah, and we can have a message of hope and redemption. I like this story, and I like the way it ties into the story in Luke chapter 17. So that's where we'll wrap up today. In Luke 17, starting in verse 11, it tells the story of 10 men who had leprosy. In other words, 10 men who had a pretty significant mess, because you see, in that day, when you had leprosy, you were ostracized. You were taken out of your community, away from the people you knew and loved and did life with, and you were placed in a leper colony outside of the city. Yes, indeed, these 10 men, they had a big mess. Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. Verse 12, and as he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and they called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us. Messiah, come touch our mess." Verse 14, and when Jesus saw them, he said, "Oh, go show yourselves to the priest." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, only one, verse 15 says, one out of the 10, when he saw he was healed, he came back. You see, he received from the Messiah a touch upon his mess, and he came back because he recognized that he had a message. He came back praising God in a loud voice. He wasn't asking for quick solutions and easy answers. He just simply came back, and he threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. Strange, don't you think? I don't think that he threw himself at Jesus' feet and said, "Thank you for the leprosy." I think he threw himself at Jesus' feet and said, "Jesus, whatever it took for me to get to this sweet place with you, whatever it took for me to realize that out of my mess the Messiah could touch me and give me a message, that I thank you for. Whatever it took, it was worth it." And then Jesus says, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he looked down, he tenderly bent down to the only one out of 10 that came back. And he said, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." Isn't it interesting that when the Messiah touches our mess and he gives us a message, you see, Jesus says something so crucial here. This one who came back, who was willing to let his mess be touched by the Messiah and turned into a message of hope that he could then give to others. Only this one was not just cleansed, he was healed, but not just healed. He was completely made well, restored, as if he'd never had leprosy in the first place. And that's the miracle of letting your mess be touched by the Messiah and turned into a message. You know, as I've taken my mess, which the Messiah touched and turned into a message, as I take it out and give it to other women, each time I share that story and I see God take what Satan meant for such evil in my life and use it for such good, I am not only cleansed, not only healed, I'm made completely well, as if I'd never even had that mess in the first place. Where will you be in this story? Will you be the one? Will you allow the Messiah to touch your mess and give you a message and take it and give this world hope? I pray that you will. Where will you be in this story? Will you be the one? Will you allow the Messiah to touch your mess and give you a message and take it and give this world hope? I pray that you will.
Amen. Jesus had a deep and thoughtful conversation with this woman at the well. This is extraordinary. Jewish rabbis in the first century never talked about faith, the scriptures, or theology with women. If you look on page 135 at the first question, what were some of the topics Jesus and the woman conversed about? And how did these topics connect the heart of this woman with the heart of God in new ways? They're asking that you reread John 4 through 15. And we're going to do that silently, just kind of skim through it. But I want you to add 16 through 18. So if we could just reread again, John 4, verses 4 through 18. we're beginning to write, we can do this together. So, what are some of the topics Jesus and the woman talked about?
Well, one thing was the men she had been dealing with were not her husband. They may have been adulterers.
Okay. We talked about the man she was with.
And the one she still had now was not her husband either. So in other words, they didn't do vows or anything in that case. She just did what a woman would do.
Anyone else?
Contrasted the physical with the spiritual in a couple of cases, where he talked about drinking water to satisfy physical thirst. And as he explained to the woman, if she drank of the water that he provided, it would be a living water and she would never thirst again. So we have a physical manifestation, and we have a spiritual connotation. Drawing the water, she had to come to the well every day to draw water. If she believed in Jesus, he assured her in verse 14 that the water that he gives would be in her, and it would be a well springing up into everlasting life. So rather than bringing her vessel and drawing water every day, she'd already have it within her. So those were two of the things that jumped out at me.
I like the fact that he told her about herself, that when he stated the fact, go get your husband, he wanted to see or brought out the truth in her. And for some strange reason, she didn't lie. She's like, I don't have a husband. I've had 5, and now I don't, but the man I'm with is not. So then he brought out of her the confession that she needed to do in order to make herself clean and to be acceptable to the spirit that he's trying to put on her. So first she had to confess it, and then he was able to heal her. That's what I got out of it.
Well, I added that because I thought it was interesting, the transition. So in 15, which was the last verse they initially said to read, the woman said, and I'm reading from the Message translation, the woman said, "Sir, give me this water so I won't ever get thirsty, won't ever have to come back to this well again." Now she's basically thinking about, I don't have to be subjected to this stuff anymore. I don't have to carry this heavy bucket, anymore. And then he just abruptly says, go get your husband. What? I'm saying I want some water. I don't ever want to thirst anymore, and you all in my business. Go get your husband. Go call your husband, and then come back. So I thought, wow, yeah. And then she says, I have no husband. I was just wondering, I'm curious, I wish I could ask, what if she hadn't told the truth?
What the outcome would be?
Yeah.
I look at it 2 ways, because we had learned with the other, I don't know how many women we are now, 10, with the other women, that to learn about God, the women weren't allowed to hear the message. So I'm thinking, and when he said, go get your husband, maybe he would understand what I'm trying to say to you, because he has heard the message, or he has been taught about the Bible. And so if you go get him, then we can have a conversation, because you have not been exposed to it, so you don't know. So that was one interpretation. That's the way I saw it.
Yeah.
And then again, will she tell the truth about her relationship with this person? Right?
But she did know about the message, because in verse 20, she tells Jesus that her fathers worshipped on the mountain, so she has some theological knowledge.
Oh yeah, she knew.
Yeah.
But they were not given the word as the men were,
Right.
because she mentioned her father, right?
But doesn't that bring up an interesting, well, it brings up an interesting point for me, while the men were allowed to partake of all the teaching, the women were sitting back and absorbing that wisdom and that knowledge for
Secondhand.
themselves, even though they weren't allowed to speak before this woman.
And so with when we learned about Mary of Bethany, right, when she sat at the feet of Jesus, I want to hear what he's saying firsthand. I don't want to be in the kitchen
Yeah.
and hear it secondhand. I want to hear it straight from his mouth. So she heard it, and she probably knew it, like you said, but she didn't have firsthand. Why are you talking to me? You know, Jews don't talk to women anyway.
She could have taken what Jesus said at face value and said, okay, he has spoken, and I'll just accept it for what it is. But they had an interchange. They had a conversation. She asked him questions, and he answered. So she was thirsty to hear more.
She was like a child that wanted to learn.
And how exciting! Here's a woman who has been a social outcast because she's a woman, because she's a Samaritan, because she's been with a lot of men, because she's on the low end of the socioeconomic status, and this man is talking to her, and not talking under her clothes, not talking about her, but talking to her. And you know, a lot of times there are many people who've never had anybody really talk to them. They'll talk at them, talk about them, but he spoke to her. You know, oh my gosh.
And one question I wrote down, what is the 6th hour? Is that 9 o'clock in the morning? Is that high noon? Because I know
Sure, probably would be.
when you talk about his crucifixion, that was at the 9th hour, and I thought,
Well, think about it. She came in the middle of the day. Most women
Yes.
came in the
The
morning
morning.
to draw the
She
water.
came
She
in
came in the middle of the day.
heat of
So
the
I
day.
think it was close to noon.
closer to noon? That's
Yeah.
what the 6th hour is?
I would think so,
All right.
based on the description here.
And so he had the opportunity just to speak to her without an audience. Okay, he was able to speak to her without any distractions, without other people, you know, oh well, you know what she is and who she is. He had the opportunity while she was there to be alone to draw the water because she was an outcast. He took that opportunity to speak directly to her for her benefit and let her have the full glory of God in that conversation. That had to be amazing.
He was sent there for a reason at that time.
Okay.
He knew from what we read or have heard that he knew she was going to do it.
Yeah.
We kind of talked upon number 2, but we know that Jesus oftentimes spoke in a way that you would have to really pay attention to what he was saying to get the message. He spoke on a spiritual level, and those that didn't get it stayed literal. She could have walked away and said, wow, this man said he got water that just flows and flows and flows. You know,
Get some of that.
she finally got it. It took her a minute, which, you know, many of us it does. But that's basically what question number 2 is talking about. So let's look at 3.
Well, on number 2 too
Sure.
as well. Even though she didn't get it, neither did his disciples, as we learned, right? He talked to them every day. They walked with him day, you know, morning, noon, and night. And they didn't understand the message that he was giving them. So I think she did.
They even asked, why do you talk like that?
What are you saying?
Why do you have to do it like that?
Get out the boat and walk. You want me to do that?
Yeah.
Oh, I like that one.
Okay, number 3 says, look closely at Jesus' treatment of this outcast woman. What does his example teach us about how we should treat those outside the faith and on the margins of society?
I would say that Jesus treated the outcast woman with love. And that's all there is to it. He gave her something that she is longing for and that every human being deserves. to be treated with kindness, with respect. And he's teaching her how to love. Because even though she had 5 husbands and a man at home, did she really know how to love?
Mm.
I would agree with you, and I would also say that in order to really lay out what that looks like, we need to unpack it a little bit.
Okay.
So he listened to her,
Mm-hmm.
he respected her, even though he may have felt superior to a Samaritan. He condescended, kind of, to be with her on her own level.
Mhm. And so that teaches us, to say whatever lofty position you think you're in, when you meet someone in need, you need to meet them where they are. Pastor Mel always tells us, meet us where they are so that they can see that we empathize with them.
And he looked beneath the surface.
Mhm.
He didn't look at just her physical characteristics, but he looked beneath the
He
surface.
knew her heart.
And this was the ministry. This was Jesus' mission, to come and get the outcasts, the
Mhm.
downtrodden.
Yes.
Those that have been kicked to the curb. No more was it about just the chosen ones. We were all going to be able to join him. And so he had to model that. His disciples didn't get it. What you coming to that woman for? And that woman, of all people,
And who has the opportunity to do that at the major level? 45. Yes.
well, we need to have him in Bible study.
Yes, we do. But he has the opportunity to look at people that are beneath his socioeconomic status and to give help. And he's rejecting Jesus at the well in every way.
Another thing, Jesus could have taken the opportunity to condemn her for her relationships
Mm-hmm.
with these men, but he didn't condemn her. He just acknowledged that, yes, this is true.
And I think he told her, go and sin on. Is that the one?
No,
he said?
no,
He said
no,
that?
no,
He
no,
didn't
not
say
that one.
That was the
Oh, that was the one.
that was the one
adultery,
who was
I'm
caught
sorry.
in the act of
Right,
adultery.
right,
Yeah. Go and say.
Juanita. They probably cleaned that up a
Yeah,
little
they
bit.
did.
And Reverend Lori was absolutely right about that time of day. It's noonday.
It's noonday?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, let's look at number 5. Number 5 says, what are some shallow answers and quick fixes that Christians sometimes deliver to people who are in the midst of a tough and messy time? What are the dangers of such simplistic and canned answers? What are some of the shallow and quick fixes that we deliver to people during tough times or messy times, and what are the dangers of that?
Today I was talking to somebody that picked me up from my appointment today, and he said that he wants to live until at least 72. He says he knows, I told him from what I heard that as soon as you're born, your number is already given to when you'll die again. And he said, well, he hopes he doesn't suffer, he don't want to do this, don't want to do that. But nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody but God and Jesus Christ, since he's sitting on the right-hand side of the Father.
Absolutely.
I had an occasion to speak to a woman who had lost a loved one, and I resisted the temptation to say to her, don't worry, she's in a better place, because they don't want to hear that at that time. They can't receive that at that time. That could be one of those quick fix answers that is really not helpful.
And this woman that had just lost her husband reminds me very much of your situation. And you have to avoid the canned, oh, he's in a better place. And the only thing that I could tell her with pure sincerity is, I cannot even imagine the pain that you're in. And she appreciated that more than someone saying, oh, you'll be all right in a couple of days, or he's in a better place, and you're going to get things are going to turn around and you'll get over it in a few minutes. And I just looked at her and I cannot even imagine your pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if there's anything that I can do, please let me know.
Yeah.
But I just could not even put myself in that situation at this time.
And my answers in many cases mirror what you just said. What can I do for you?
Yes.
Because I'm taking my cues from them. If they want me to pray for them, I'll pray. If they want me to bring them a casserole, they may not want it when they get it. But I'll take it by anyway.
Jeez, Jim.
They may want me to just sit with them.
Yes. Yes.
But you tell me what I can do for you.
Well, I think those cliche-ish things that we say, even if we're quoting from the Bible, oftentimes the timing is bad, as we kind of mentioned. And a lot of times when people are going through a tough time, they really need you to listen. I've mentioned that a few times in the pastor's word about active listening, where you close your mouth, because you're not the one going through, and in the course of listening, you will sometimes find out what it is they need, And so it's just like Job's friends. They sat with him. They sat with him for 7 days. They couldn't take it no longer. That's a long time, though.
And they had all the answers.
And they had all the answers, right?
They
So
let him wallow
all
in
the
his pity.
all the quick fixes.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Curse God and
Yeah,
let it go.
You must have done something, Yeah. So the danger, of course, would be that, especially if we're using God in the scenario, because as you said, we don't know. We don't know what that might have been that person's appointed time. We don't know. But we don't want to do anything that will take away from the glory of God. We don't want to turn the person away from church. And people are very weak and frail during times when they're going through some serious things. So you have to handle them very gently and prayerfully. So.
Yeah, and my neighbor, her response was, the Lord will lead me to my next step. And I said, well, if I can be, I'll be there with you on your next step. And she said, I appreciate that more than anything ever. She said, thank you very much. I will call you. And I'm like, okay.
Well, we have certainly probably not spent enough time talking about how God has entered into our messes. But we are so grateful for this opportunity to have studied 11 women in the Bible. We have one more next Thursday at 7 o'clock. And that will wrap up our series of the women in the Bible. To coin with one other member said, I'm so glad you picked this. This has been extremely exciting and inspiring. So we want to invite those of you that are out there to join us. You can join us live. You come on in here at 7 o'clock on Thursday, and if you'd like to join our worship service at 11 o'clock, I promise you it will be an experience. God bless you and God keep you.
These are the weekly announcements for the Grace United Church of Christ located in Sauk Village, Illinois. Our senior pastor is the Reverend Melody L. Seaton. Would you like to learn more about the Samaritan woman at the well and how her situation applies to us in the present day? Come join us for Thursday night Bible study. Class begins at 7 p.m. If you can't make it in person, tune in through live stream. Our Sunday school lesson this week will look at Isaiah in the temple. Sunday school begins at 9:30 a.m. Children and adults are welcomed. Does God Know You is the title of an inspired message to be delivered by our senior pastor, the Reverend Melody L.